Good morning, everybody. Welcome to NTWC Plus. It is Wednesday, the 28th day of August of 2024. Glad to have you along today. I think we're going to have another fascinating show today. Leslie Chapman Henderson of Flash, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, will join us in just a couple of minutes to talk about some great projects that are upcoming. They've done so many wonderful projects already, and some more things are coming, and we're going to hear about that coming up in just a few minutes. Before we get any farther, let's thank our sponsors who make these shows a possibility each and every week, all summer long, throughout the hurricane season. USAA, thank you, USAA. We appreciate you for all you do for us, for the National Tropical Weather Conference in person, and of course for the Storm Science Network in general. The South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, our hosts for the National Tropical Weather Conference in person. We'll be back on South Padre Island in April. We hope you will too. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Weather Call, all organizations that, again, make NTWC Plus a possibility. We'll get to Bill Reed in just a second. Let me start by saying hello to Hurricane Hal. Good morning, Hal. Where are you this morning?
Morning, everybody. A few thunderstorms in the neighborhood, but a beautiful day in Galveston Island. So excited to be with you all this morning.
That picture behind you is not live in Galveston, right? That's somewhere else.
That's the Gulf of Mexico feed, I think. We do have a few thunder bumpers, but it's good. We need the rain.
Good. We'll take it. Good to have you along, Hal. Bill Reed, former director of the Hurricane Center, with us as always. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, Tim. And Hal, you can send the thunderstorms up here. We could use about another inch.
We'll take it as it comes. You know, I think Texas begging almost across the state. Even Alex talking this morning about how there was a little bit of rain in the hill country yesterday. They need it desperately. Bill, a fun and fascinating guest today.
You betcha. I'll give you a formal introduction and then we'll get going. Today we have Leslie Chapman Henderson, the CEO of the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. Flash is the country's leading consumer advocate for strengthening homes and safeguarding families from natural and man-made disasters. Flash was founded in 1998 and brings together more than 100 diverse partners that share a vision of making America a more disaster-resilient nation. And I'm one of those. We've been working together on collaboration on projects, I guess, since about 2003 when we first started down the Turnaround Don't Drown campaign. And then at the Hurricane Center, always had me come and talk and run ideas. I'll never forget the Go Tapeless episode we had. So anyway, welcome, Leslie. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm here in Tallahassee today with Sarah, and always great to join you guys. And we always hear from a lot of people, whether they watch live or by recording, and sometimes you help us find new partners, so really grateful for the opportunity.
Good. Yeah, that has been one of the benefits of doing these weekly shows is we learn about different people that we may otherwise not know anything at all about that can fit within our goals of making us safer for hurricanes. So there's probably people on here that know nothing about Flash. So I'm going to turn it back to you to give us what is it you do and how did you do this business?
And we put together a couple of slides for visuals just because, and I do like to always kind of start with who we are because our organizational construct is a little bit unique where we have the identical shared mission of strengthening homes and safeguarding families from disasters of all kinds. But as you can see, just by the board level participation, we have a very diverse public, private, nonprofit array of partners that come together to accomplish that mission. And we started out, I was in the insurance industry for 12 years. We started out after Hurricane Andrew, basically as a committee. And our organizing question was, okay, everybody has a very well-defined role. In mine, it was catastrophe response to customers of my company. The Hurricane Center, of course, you know better than anyone what the role there is in forecasting the storms. You know, the building code universe was there to talk about building code improvements. But basically, the question was, how are we going to come together to make sure that we build better in the face of hurricanes in the beginning? And now, of course, we talk and educate and do outreach and create awareness around everything from earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfire, and even winter storms. Because it comes down to it, the way we build our buildings, with respect to larger, more commercial buildings. And the commercial building codes we use, it's pretty sound. They're engineered, they're, unique structures. But the way we build our residential structures, our homes, frankly, is a little bit of the luck of the draw. In some places, you guys are in Texas, so I'll kind of point you out. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. In some places in Texas, you have, like the Metroplex, you have some of the best building codes in the nation, and you keep current with those. San Antonio proper, great current building codes, but once you cross out into Bexar County, and Alex got my fingers crossed for you there aren't any residential codes per se. So we really have to focus in on the things we can do to our home and help people understand that, okay, so maybe your house was built a long time ago with an older code. There are still things, many things you can do to strengthen it. And that's what we're all about, is finding those steps that you can take to make your home stronger, A, so that you can be safe, and B, so that you can come home and return back to your largest investment being intact. So that's what we're all about. The next slide, I'm sorry, this one's a little light, but I always like to kind of talk about this piece, and then I'll pause. Just let me know if you have questions, because I know we want to make this a conversation. But when we talk about how we get to a resilient home, there's really 3 paths, and these are the 3 areas. And this is a page out of a 90-page playbook we published this year that has been a very successful publication. So we'll make sure we put that link in the chat too. So it's basically, build it right the first time when we construct new homes. And that's all about building codes and what we call code future attributes, things that are tested but haven't gotten into the code yet. But programs like the insurance industry's Fortified program deliver those leading edge practices, right? And I know you got a new roof, so we can talk about that a little bit and all the cool new things that were done to that. The second way we get to a resilient single family home is by fixing up the old stuff, right? That's item 2, retrofitting, strengthening. And then the third is to create and sustain a social value through the marketplace that offers the right products and technologies and services, because it's what the marketplace wants. And once you get that public demand in place, and for certain things in certain parts of the country, we've succeeded very nicely with that. There are places like in Oklahoma, people don't want to buy a home without a tornado safe room, for example. So that public demand, that culture of resilience, that's when the liftoff takes place, and everything is happening without us having to be there, frankly. So those are kind of the 3 ways, Bill, that, as you know, as a longtime partner, that we tackle getting the resilient home in place.
That's great. It leads right into some of the questions I have on the first one. I think we've got a good message. I think convincing the builders that it's the way to go probably requires the number 3 part of that being put in place. The retrofitting and strengthening is a tough nut to crack. I'll just use my example over here. I used a company out of Alabama that was very successful in retrofitting and in building new houses with fortified roofs. And the proof came with Hurricane Sally, with great drone footage to show how well his roofs performed. So I went and spent a little bit more money than the neighbors do to have that put on here. And me, I'm not quiet ever. I talk to all these neighbors. Everyone needs new roofs. So along comes Hurricane Beryl, and there's all kinds of old roofs here with missing shingles, and they're all using the same hurry up and get a new roof on companies getting the new roofs here. I haven't figured out the spark I need to get that turnaround over here. It may be the cost. Everybody's pressed for money these days, and I don't know. What do you think?
Well, let's go to the next slide. And let's talk about building codes. One of the reasons we push so hard, and we're only 33% to goal with respect to the entire United States, of having the building codes in place that have those provisions in them for things like high wind or other hazards, right? Like wildfire. We don't want combustible, ignitable roof covering on those rooftops. So the trick is in, those opportunity moments, new construction, post disaster, to your point, you have a vast opportunity to upgrade the building stock of entire communities. But if it's voluntary and you don't have the underlying code already in place, which unfortunately you have a lot of holes in your codes in Texas, then it's not required. But in cases where the building code is in place and there's widespread disaster damage, then they are required to take you to the upgraded building code. The big feature in the roofing resilience space right now is what you now have on your roof, which is the sealed roof deck, right?
Yeah.
In most cases across the US, most roofs are made out of asphalt shingles. So at certain wind speeds, despite our best efforts and really great improvements in the shingles, which continue, I was at a laboratory last week looking at the next great thing, those shingles are going to come off. And if your roof deck is exposed and doesn't have another layer of either something like continuous ice and water shield or peel and stick tape on the seams, we have to leave those roof decks, as you know, with gaps in them so wood can expand and contract. And that water's going to come right through into your attic. And that type of damage is so expensive. The testing shows that you get 9 bathtubs of water per minute of wind-driven rain through the seams of your deck once you lose your shingles. So that sealed roof deck is now in the building code model, not for everywhere. It's in there for a table for windborne debris regions. My understanding is, and this is a problem too, the stuff goes so slow, in the 2027 model of the code, the expectation is the sealed roof deck will be there in an even broader area. So picture a big disaster, those places that have the code, they'll automatically have to put it back in place in a better way. But we've got work to do in Texas because you've got the high disaster impacts without the commensurate level of code. So it's a challenge. And we're actually working on a project. We just finished a study and we're looking for ways, to your point, to reach out and partner with the builders. In Alabama, you used an Alabama builder, which is funny. Those Alabama builders have really embraced all this, and they've embraced the business model is very favorable for sealed roof deck and for fortified, and they've embraced it. And so once that happens, I think the best statistic about that is that in Alabama, the government, we have different matching programs and grants through the government, and they have one called Strengthen Alabama Homes. They've given out 6,600 grants for strengthened roofs and homes. However, they've given out 6,600 grants, yet their marketplace has delivered 45,000 fortified roofs and homes.
Wow.
So that third piece, that culture of resilience, is happening. In the coast of Alabama, they lifted up their code. They found a way for the business model to work, and now they can just sit back and they will reliably see stronger roofs built, which is good for everybody because when the neighborhoods are intact, people can come home, get back to work, back to school, and their communities, aren't at risk. So that is a huge part of the work that we do, as you know, and we're not done, but we've made tremendous inroads over the past, especially the last 4 or 5 years. FEMA has really stepped forward with the new FEMA Building Code strategy. I serve on the Building Code Secretariat and Working Group. There's the National Initiative to Advance Building Codes from the White House. There's new building code set-asides for small communities and others that need a little help. They need resources setting up a building code department. So we're making great progress, but we still have work to do on codes.
Yeah. There are a few builders I know that market the houses they're building as to what code they're building to, which is, I think, is great. And they do it instead of just its code of 2000 or whatever. They'll say it's being built to such and such wind speed code. I think that's important for people to know. So where would, I'm sure there's lots of people that might be interested, but have no idea how to find out what code their house is built for, or what the code is for a new house where they live. What would you recommend they do?
So we have the consumer-facing solution to exactly that question. If you go to inspect2protect.org, and you can either put in your zip code, or if you put in your full address, you can get a red, yellow, green map analysis of the building codes where you live. And there it is. Thank you, Sarah. It's also going to be suggested upgrades calibrated to the code version you have. Most of us didn't just build a house this year. Most of them were built in the past. So it's really important to be able to kind of pinpoint the version of the code and what that package of building requirements was and what may or may not be left out. So this building code lookup, and we've enhanced it year over year. And like I said, we have another big thing coming in January. You can get your code status for your residential and your commercial if you need it. Because if you're in a multifamily building, you're renting, or you own something in a multifamily, a large commercial building, we can give you that too. But you get your suggested upgrades. You'll get disaster history, FEMA declared disasters, and then a pretty good deep dive on the specific things that may not be there that you can do yourself. We like to emphasize the achievable, affordable steps to fix up your home. There's lots of DIY hacks and other things that we promote and have promoted over the years. So this is a great website for that. It's important to note that we work with three other organizations, and we have this data set. All of us have it for different audiences. Ours is the consumer-facing set. It's very simple. But the good thing about our organization is if you're confused or you have a question, you can call us or you can email us. And this is something that we know people need as well. So the building code lookup tool is a great one. And that's a big part of what we do. And I've got a couple things here. I'm going to jump around a little bit maybe, but did you want to talk about how we promote things like this, Bill?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is the fun slide on the next one. You guys know this, and Bill's a veteran of the Navy as well as the Hurricane Awareness Tour. I wanted to talk to you guys about, because if there's anybody on the recording later that sees this and they want to promote however they're driving resilience or safety for hurricane, the hashtag Hurricane Strong program is a great one. Sarah, if you want to go to that next slide, we go out with, well, you know what, Bill, why don't you talk about what HAT is first, and then I'll show you guys what we do
Got a
in
freeze on my
conjunction
end,
with
I
it.
think.
Are we frozen, guys? Have we locked up?
Yeah, I've
No.
I'm
yeah.
still here.
So we're yeah.
Can you guys hear me, or am I frozen?
No, we got you.
Okay. All right. Well, Bill, did you want to talk about the hat for a moment, the NOAA hat, and I'll talk about what we do as part of it?
Yeah.
Sarah's going to advance the slide. I think she's having a hiccup with the.
Yeah. Okay. The Hurricane Awareness Tours, the HAT and the CHAT, the Caribbean Hurricane Awareness Tours, got started in the early 70s. In fact, I think I was on the first one the Navy did. We had gotten a new P3, and that was I got a picture of the first on-camera interview I did. I'm glad I don't have a recording of it, because I think I butchered the answers right and left. But in any event, the idea is to use the aircraft to bring people out. They're going to want to see the hurricane hunter plane and talk to the hurricane hunters, but then you have all these other people out there that like Flash that have information desks, and people can get a lot of information in one spot, and the media covers it, and it really gets people started on preparing for hurricane season.
Right. So we created Hurricane Strong to kind of launch with the hat, right? And that is something that we want to, when we go out on the hat tour and we go to the 5 cities, and you can see the picture here, it might be a little small. We're flying with American heroes, right? Hurricane hunters, people like Bill who have dedicated their careers to this at the Hurricane Center, the scientists, the navigators. And so we're coming out with building science. So we have to look for a way to keep it to make it so that the information we're giving is interesting and engaging as all the great people that we're traveling with. So we designed this program, Hurricane Strong, to do that, because we need to move people. When it comes to hurricane messaging, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming with the amount of information that we're telling the public we want them to do. So we gave them, together with the Hurricane Center, Bill, Dr. Rick Knabb, when he was there, and others, we created this path, right? And starting with safety, and the first priority for safety is, of course, knowing your zone, and then helping people figure out reminders about kits. And every year it's kind of fun to talk about the latest, geek tech toys and solar powered coolers and different things, but just helping people understand we're continuously making progress. And then our big piece is strengthening your home, as I said before. So every year we look at that and we get really good traction on that. Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide. This is just pictures from the hat. We had a walk-on this year in Charleston on the lower left. I don't know if you guys recognize that, is Governor McMaster from South Carolina. He was having a news conference nearby and heard about the hat and how the aircraft and everybody was on the flight line. And he said to his gathered event, okay, everybody, we're out of here. Let's go over with the cool people and go to the hat tour. You guys have a sponsor there, Tim. You mentioned USAA. They're a big sponsor, a partner of ours and a big sponsor in all that we do. And they came out, and of course, a lot of their members of the military are out there, and our Lowe's partners. And it's all about helping people understand what they can do when the skies are blue, right? And getting them out there. I want to just show you this next slide because I think it speaks to the power of just the hashtag alone, Bill. So what you're looking at here is from X, also known as Twitter. The impressions, reach, and mention the week before the hat, okay? Not bad, 9 million, the reach is there. The hashtag Hurricane Strong has become the call to arms for anybody talking about safety, preparation, and resilience or service regarding hurricane season. Look at the jump in the numbers from the week before the hat to the week of the hat this year. It is clearly, 156 mentions the week before, 3,000 plus the week after. That's the power of the collaboration of the Hurricane Strong program, coupled with the NOAA Hurricane Awareness Tour, and all the different people that come together to have the conversation about, hey, America, let's get ready for hurricane season. And so this is something that we've been very excited about. I know we're going to come up on a break in a minute or so, and I want to come back from that. I want to talk about what our signature message was this year, but I didn't know if you had any questions about the hashtag or how we do the messaging and keep it alive, throughout the rest of the season.
But the question I would have, I guess, is when there's actually a hurricane threat, do you get active on X with messaging appropriate to that?
We do. So what we do, and of course, like many, we know a great number of our audience is on Facebook, as well as X. And X is where a lot of our partners are from the media and other leadership voices. And then we also use LinkedIn, and we become very active. And of course, it's funny, our numbers look like the Alps when you start looking at timeline and surges and jumps in numbers, because that's when, of course, people are paying attention, and we take full advantage of that by sliding those messages in and making sure that we, one mistake that we have to avoid, and we're always cautious with ourselves to make sure we don't, we can assume nothing about the level of understanding. There's a lot of people who are new to this hurricane thing. We have a mobile society. Maybe they just moved to Louisiana or Alabama or Florida or the Carolinas. They've never done a hurricane before. So we have to give them the basic information, starting with safety, know your zone, get your supplies, your kit, your meds, your pet food, everything together. And then, okay, how do you protect your house? And so we make sure we do that, and we see the numbers go way up because people are really paying attention. And then there's a fairly well-sustained post-event window of opportunity to do outreach and education as well, because the rest of the world is watching often when we have a major hurricane make landfall.
Absolutely. I realize it's always too late to do some of those items, but the critical things that'll make it less miserable for you can be done in fairly short time as a storm comes in. And I've been remiss. I haven't given Tim or Hal any chances to ask questions here, so I'll do better in the second half of the show. Or Alex will unplug me.
No, doing great. Great questions, great insight, Bill. We appreciate that. Why don't we take a quick break and you can, Sarah, you can unshare for a moment. And Bill, you can do the tropical update and bring us up to speed on what's going on now, because there's actually something to talk about now. And then we'll get back, we'll get Hal's GeoTrek, and then we'll get on with the second half of the show. So Bill, take it away.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I started out last night just thinking about what to say. I said, there's like hardly anything to talk about. And by the time I was finished, I filled up my my bar with all kinds of links of neat stuff to show. So let's get to it. Oh, well, I didn't set it up right, but I'll get it there. Okay. All right. You should see the 7-day outlook for the tropical Atlantic. Is that correct?
We do, yes.
Excellent. Okay. We actually have two things on here. This is 10% is probably generous. It looked pretty anemic this morning, and a lot of shear and stuff, dry air that's around. This one's of some interest, but it doesn't really tickle the models too much until after or at the end of the outlook period. And that's why they only have a 20% chance going for that. The wide view of the Atlantic Basin. I'll talk about this in a minute, but the system that they're 20%ing is out here. And as those of you that most of you have watched these things more than I do, probably anymore, but there's nothing really indicative of a storm brewing at this present time. And this is the area that was in the outlook. And as you can see, what little convection there was is dissipating, and it looks to me like it's being tugged up into the westerlies and will not be a tropical threat. Okay, this is the ensemble run of the European that I like to use to show at least what might be coming down the pike as we go out in time. And just these are where the model picks up and one of the members or many of them what might be developing as a low. And there's the system in the middle of the tropical Atlantic heading towards the Northeast Caribbean. A few of the members, that's really not a whole lot of members given what is actually run by the model picking up on that. So it's still not a sure bet that something will develop there. Then there was this system that is coming off Africa that has gotten our good friend Michael Lowry's attention. I'll show you his work on that here in a second. So that's coming out maybe as early as Friday, but certainly over the weekend, crossing the Cape Verdes, and the model it tends to get excited about that. And look at all these potential lows in the Gulf of Mexico. None of them developing anything, but it does every now and then spark a low. It's a reason to keep a mind on it. So there you have it. It's a week ago when I showed you this graphic, there was nothing on it. So it's definitely changed its tune since then. This is Michael Lowry's graphic on it, and it's a better satellite perspective than I had, so I'm using that. And he mentioned the very important fact that the waves that have been coming off Africa so far this season have been way up here north of Cape Verde. Here's one coming down in the more traditional location just to the south of Cape Verde. So it's better removed from the dry Saharan air that was disrupting any of the new ones. So that definitely bears watching. Whoops, wrong one again. There we go. Another look at it from the model perspective. This is the 850 is the color fill, which is the vorticity, which is an indication of low-level circulation. The lines are 500 millibar height, which is mid-level and a guess at the steering flow, and the wind barbs are the high level, the development of outflow, if you will. that you look for. It's a great way to look at all three factors of something that's may develop, and it it doesn't lose it. Let's put it that way. It looks like by the time this time next week, we might be talking about a storm out in the middle of the Atlantic, and I don't even want to hazard a guess if the accuracy of the model on where it would be going still. Last but not least, need to update that. All this convection out in the Gulf. I'm actually getting a lot of questions from friends and whatnot about why aren't they talking about this low developing in the Gulf? And a couple of guys I know reminded me of Umberto. They plugged that in there. Umberto was not outlooked as anything. It was just there was just a lot of cloudiness and junk out in the Gulf of Mexico like we have now. But it formed just south of Galveston. This is in 2007. It formed overnight, made landfall as a 90-mile-an-hour hurricane that morning and dissipated, but less than 24 hours after it developed. Kind of have to keep an eye on this stuff. Right now, there is no surface low pressure at all in the area there. It's all east winds all the way down through the Caribbean even. Going west, here are the three storms that we've been watching out in the eastern Pacific and then in the central Pacific. Onei is the one that caused considerable impact with heavy rain and some wind damage in the Big Island over the weekend. Gilma was the storm that reached major status out in the eastern Pacific and is pretty much dying. And then Hector out to the east there. Both of these look like they're heading right towards Hawaii, but they're forecast to dissipate into either a remnant low or an open wave with not any convection with them even as they cross the island. So at this time, doesn't look to pose a threat. Let's see what I got here. And this is why. This is Gilma. It's hanging in there in spite of the tremendous dry air. It's a water vapor loop, and the yellows are very dry air. But there's still some convection around its center. Hector's still in the atmosphere. It's not all that bad, but it's running in the wake of Gilma, so it probably has minimal impact from improved sea temperature, if you will. And Onei is getting a lot of shear from this upper trough and the westerly winds involved with it, but it's still producing convection. And heck, we may be talking about all three of them next week. Well, who knows? Even further west, it's not on the, haven't seen anything on the news on, but we've got a big hurricane making landfall on the island of Kyushu right now. It's just off of there. And our good storm chasing buddy, Josh Morgerman, is right about there. Well, no, I don't know where he is. He landed at an airport about there. I'll bet he's right about there on that peninsula. If there's a road that could get him there, him and James Reynolds are chasing this thing down. But notice how slow it's moving. There's some mountainous terrain in here. The right side upslope flow. I think we'll see tremendous amount of flooding impacts from this hurricane and wind impacts. I don't know the topography or bathymetry, so I don't really know what the storm surge impacts will be like, but I'm sure there are some to be seen in that area. Okay, what else do I got on that? The satellite imagery of it, it's actually trying to reform an eye again. It kind of lost its eye feature on satellite, but it's just about ready to make landfall on this point here. The forecast was for it to be there this afternoon, so it's still looking good. Well, yeah, they're getting gusts of 74 miles an hour at Kanoya Airport in there. These airports have stopped reporting. I wonder if they shut down due to the threat there. I'm not sure. And there is radar in Japan. Let's see if I've still got it there. This is from the Japanese Meteorological Service, and they highlight these things for exceptional rain. We might call it a flash flood emergency in our system, but they'll put it localized torrential rain in their system for this island south of Kyushu as the eye of the storm. The eye wall went right through there. So lots of different ways for people to display this stuff, and this is how they do it in the country of Japan. I think I've covered all I was going to cover. What you got for questions, Tim?
Well, Bill, just 2 weeks ago, the tropical update was 30 seconds long, and we didn't have anything to talk about. So we almost can do a whole show just on what's happening today in the Atlantic. It's still, I mean, relatively speaking, for this time of year, kind of quiet. So we may need to add more time next week.
Well, next week we'll have Phil, so we'll grill him to death about why his forecast is busting.
Exactly. So great update, though. It's interesting to see. We often just think about the Atlantic Basin as the only thing that has a direct impact on us, but so much going on around the world we can learn from. I love that Japanese radar. That's kind of cool thing to look at. What's that website? Is that a public domain website?
Just Google Japanese Meteorological Service. If you Google radar, you get the first 14 sites are ads for a well-known private weather company, and has nothing to do with Japan's radar. It drives me nuts, but I won't say they are. Anyway, I appreciate you guys letting me play weatherman once a week.
Well, you do a great job of it. We appreciate the expertise. Thanks, Bill. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors who are here week in and week out. We're here because of them, and we appreciate each and every one of them. USAA, we've talked about them a lot, and Bill, you've done testimonials for them about how wonderful they are for what you've done at your place, and we appreciate that. USA, a strong advocate for all of this, and Leslie, you mentioned them too. They really understand what we're trying to do and what you're trying to do, and we appreciate them for all they do. South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. We went to them, I don't know, was it 12, 13 years ago? And so we want to do this conference on South Padre Island. And they said, we're all in, let's make it happen. Let us help you make it happen, because they understood the value of the message, the message that we try to get out, not only with the in-person conference, but with these is very important as well. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, all an important part of what we're doing. We appreciate all of them for what we do. We talk about Weather Boy, they actually sponsor a trip for college students to come to this conference, to the in-person conference, and give aspiring meteorologists a chance to sit down across the table from Bill or Hal or Leslie and just talk weather for a little while and talk about careers and ways to get involved. And we've had some great students come in over the years, and we appreciate that. So thank you so much. We appreciate that. All right. Hurricane Hal, Dr. Hal Needham, you've been really quiet for this first half hour. Let's get you involved with your GeoTrek update, and then throw in some questions. And I've got a couple of good questions coming in online as well. Hal, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Well, with GeoTrek, we're exploring the world to tell stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. We've been doing a lot of traveling lately and a lot of podcasting as well. If you've enjoyed our conversation this morning with Leslie, check out GeoTrek podcast number 98. Leslie joined us recently on the GeoTrek podcast to tell us more about how she got involved in disaster resiliency and more of the backstory of Flash. Something I learned on that podcast, I didn't know that Flash not only works with hurricanes, wind and flood risk, but also earthquake risk, wildfire risk. They're really tackling all hazards to make your home more resilient and more, resilient to natural disasters and extreme weather. So you can check out that podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Again, that's a podcast with Leslie Chapman Henderson and Flash. That's podcast number 98 for GeoTrek. And also recently, we've been traveling a lot. Last week, the GeoTrek team went out to San Antonio. Not only did we endure 109-degree temperatures, Alex, you need to warn us about that, by the way. When we come out, just say, hey, you're going to probably fry to death out here in San Antonio. It was hot, but we had a great time. We were at the Texas Groundwater Summit. I gave the keynote address on really how I think communications is the last frontier in science. And then we recorded a lot of podcast interviews with guests at the conference. What I thought was interesting, here at NTWC Plus, we're focusing on tropical weather and tropical hazards, but there we were at a groundwater summit. And a lot of these issues with scientific analysis, communication, engaging with stakeholders, there was a lot of crossover. So you're going to enjoy that as well. That's GeoTrek podcast number 102 from the Texas Groundwater Summit. It just aired yesterday, wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, that's GeoTrek podcast 102. I think that kind of sums up an update of what we've been doing with GeoTrek lately.
All right, terrific. It's great stuff. Always enjoy listening. And Hal, I just love your questions. Your inquisitive nature makes it fun, and you take subjects and make them fascinating to listen to. All right. Well, Hal, jump in. You've got questions, I know. So your turn. Ask a few. And again, let's
I had a question for Leslie. I mean, we hear so many people focus on the roof, and rightfully so. If you lose your roof, it's, as Josh Morgerman says, it's game over. But Flash is really the first organization I heard talking a lot about garage doors as well. Leslie, could you tell us about that initiative? You're really engaging with folks about thinking about their garage doors and ways to strengthen their garage to protect their home.
I would love to, and I have a slide just on that exact topic. So thank you to Dr. Mark Levitan of NIST for coming to our conference, the National Disaster Resilience Conference, every November. You're all invited, and talking to us about a correlation study he and his team did regarding the Joplin tornado. They looked at 3,000 homes, and in the field post-storm, we've seen, and I've 35 years, when we see damage to the roof that looks like it came from the inside out and the walls around the garage, we know it starts in I would say it's more than 95% of the time when trouble starts on a house with high wind damage, it starts with a garage door that can't hold up to the wind or the impacts of the debris that are flying in the wind comes because it's the largest and weakest opening on your house, right? And on the right-hand side, you see here a non-wind loaded door, and we have millions of those out there. So this information and this study is relevant for severe convective storms or severe thunderstorms, whichever label you want to put on them, which are now driving insured losses at an increase of 9% per year. So just ordinary severe storms are in kind of part of this as well, tornadoes and hurricanes, okay? The 3,000 homes that they examined, they developed the correlation when the garage door was intact, so were the adjacent walls and the roof. And so what their work did is it validated something that we and our engineers and others have seen for decades. When things go south, it usually starts with the garage door. So that's the first piece, is we can validate what we've known all along. And it gives it, I just love what you just said, Hal, about how communication is the last frontier of science, because this is where we take science and engineering knowledge and we take it to the street and to people. And the good news here is there are 3 levels of solutions for garage door strengthening. And what we've been doing this year, and of course, in our typical fashion, you know, we are the people that were in Disney for 8 years and turn around, don't drown, and go tapeless. So we developed a call to arms, which is if it's 2024, it's about your garage door, right? That's our call to action this year, because we want people across the country to know that you can do a DIY temporary garage door strengthening for $125 or less, or you can buy a steel brace and have it pre-installed. So all you have to do is swing the column down as the storm approaches. Or if you're buying a new garage door, you can pick one that looks more like the one on the left with all the extra strength and heft to withstand those impacts and that pressure from the wind. So we've spent a lot of time talking about this. I do want to kind of show you that this message, because it's so relevant for so many people. If you go to the next slide, Sarah, we've had, and this is out of date now, we continue to push, and I hope through this, we're pushing this knowledge level forward. We've seen tons of take up of this information and a lot of shock from people. On the next slide, you'll see some of the headlines. You know, things that say things like, wow, it may just be as simple as the garage door. And guess what? To your point, in 90+% of the instances, it is exactly that. So this is a breakthrough. It's not that we didn't know this, it's just now we can kind of prove it. And by having that data there to prove it and helping people see the case, we've been able to get trusted voices like all of yours to take up this mantle. And let's talk about your garage door. What do we see when the hurricane watches and warnings go up? We see boarding up, windows, doors. But is anybody taking care of the garage door? Often no. So this is a big topic for us this year, and I wanted to bring it here so we could talk about it more, because it's also very affordable, as you just heard.
Leslie, thanks so much for that overview. I think a lot of our audience here is going to be like, okay, this is amazing. And I love that you often provide do-it-yourself solutions. You know, you provide everything from here's how to build better the first time to here's how you retrofit some expensive and inexpensive solutions. It allows everyone to be part of disaster resiliency, which I really admire that you're touching such a wide range of an audience there.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunities like this and the work that Alex and Tim and all of you guys have been doing for years to bring this kind of information, because we do long-term, multi-year studies, quick surveys. All we're constantly doing is surveying and asking people, and 8 out of 10 Americans don't have any concerns about their house in a disaster because they're confident that they're all set. And so we have this dual job. We have to disrupt that confidence, which is, important, but also a little tricky. We don't want to scare anyone, but we have to make them aware that you may have some things to do to get to that resilient place. And that's what we're hard at work doing all the time. But if you tell someone, hey, your house may not be ready, then we have to be ready with a solution. It has to be achievable. It has to be affordable. It can't just be, we can't just say, okay, your house isn't prepared for a hurricane. We could say, here's how you can do it. And this additional garage door element is something we're going to talk about forever and include in everything we do, because it's, again, as I said before, it's also relevant for tornado. It's relevant for severe thunderstorms. This is where the trouble can start. And there's all kinds of things you can do. Say you're not temporarily bracing it, go out and check the structure around your garage door. Make sure the screws are tight, the rollers are good, everything's working, and then it's not going to have any gaps. There's just a million different ways to strengthen your home with respect to this door.
Leslie, another reason I think your work is so effective, you're not only messaging a broad audience, you're also following that up with social science and surveys to find out what's working and what's not. I know you've had a lot of partners with that, all the way from, like Carnegie Mellon to different nonprofit and government partners. Could you share with us a little bit about some of the follow-up work you do after you message to find out what's working well and what can be improved?
So I mentioned before that we had been in, and Bill was involved, and Alex and Tim both visited. We worked with Disney years ago and created a very unique experience in Epcot called Storm Struck, A Tale of Two Homes. And wow, did we learn in the course of working with them. And one of the things we learned is if you're communicating with people, it's a two-way proposition. It's not a one-way. So you have to make sure you check to see how it's going and if anyone heard what you said, if they understand it. So in the course of creating Stormstruck, which was a 3,000 square foot, what they called edutainment experience, fun and storytelling with safety in mind, periodically we'd stop, mock it up, and test it in the park. And people would say, that's boring, because we'd overload it with the science. Or we'd take it and test it in the park, and our science partners would go, oh, that's not quite accurate. So we'd have to balance that seesaw out to get that right mix of accurate information that was still engaging. And then you have to study and see if it sticks. We did work with Carnegie Mellon. We did a 1-year follow-on. We had folks in. We talked to them, we gave them our story-fied messaging, and then we came back a year later and said, what do you remember? Did you do anything? And what's the priority? And the results were off the charts. And it was interesting because the Disney partners were not surprised at all, because when you empower people with information and you put them in charge as they put their own storm story, it's a very different thing than making people feel helpless, which we can never do because we're not helpless. There are so many things we can do that make a difference in a storm. Simplest things can make the biggest difference. So that's a continuous process for us. We'll be unveiling a new study that we completed. We're in the throes now figuring out what to do with what we learned. And in January, we'll have that study coming out because we're still not where, as I said before, where we need to be, but we're working very hard to get there.
Thank you, Leslie. Fascinating perspectives. You're talking about stickiness, how well something sticks, following back up, I think also important. Tim, do we have any questions that have come in online so far in the session this morning?
We do have a particularly good question. I think it's fascinating. This comes from Casper, who always asks some good questions. And he's asking about, in most storms, it seems like a lot of our fatalities that we have are from trees falling on homes. Is there any science, is there any research being done about that, about fortifying the roof against falling trees? It's a difficult proposition, but is there something out there that's difficult that's never stopped us before?
Well, that's a great point, and it's true. So there's a whole host of steps in a timeline of sorts that you can do. One is starting with just an annual checkup for your trees. Realizing where I live, we have the tall pines, And as they age, they can become like the part of a clock, right? So we're looking at those and checking their health, making sure we don't have beetles, which we did. And one of them we had to go because it had beetles, which means in a windstorm, it's at risk of falling on the house. Another aspect to that is, and we always tell people, call your local extension office, and those agents may be willing to come out and walk your property with you and help you figure out the health of your tree. There's lots of experts and different services there. Keep those trees also, those healthy trees still probably have things that need to be maintained or limbed up, right? Because our trees become the source. Trees and vegetation, as well as building materials, turn into what in a hurricane? Missiles. So we have to trim those up and limb them up. And then just the heightened awareness of where you are. If you're taking refuge in your own home during a storm, you need to think about those trees and where they are, and not be in the rooms where they could potentially fall. And this is something that, that's a great question, because it reminds people that that is something that happens. And all too often, it's also something we see happen. Those types of fatalities are especially prevalent in mobile homes. And so those are things to think about and to plan for. And like everything else, if you can't be home and you can't take refuge safely at home, figure out that place with a friend or family member ahead of time where you can go before the storm. But we have some tips on flash.org about what to think about with your trees and your landscape. You can spill from that conversation on high wind into flooding and the water flow around your house, and keeping the gutters clean and the downspouts well connected, and making sure that the water is going away from your foundation, and how you can use berms and culverts around your yard and different types of grasses that will absorb and help you get that water to flow in the other place. So that, we talk a lot about high wind and hurricanes, but we can't forget the water. And but that's a great question.
And another, going a different direction completely, but do you find that in your research and following up on it, that in places where a hurricane or even a tornado is a once in a generation thing, that it hasn't happened in this generation? You mentioned before we started talking on air about Tallahassee, but it just don't happen here. And Hal's talked a lot about that too. Is it harder to get those people to respond than it is in places, where storms seem to be more regular, if you will?
Without a doubt. In fact, so we talked about research and surveys. We do an annual hurricane survey, and we talk to people and say, did you prepare last year? Are you going to prepare this year? One of the questions we added this year, our new chairman, Arthur Parks from State Farm, asked us to add this. When people tell us they're not going to prepare, we asked them why. And it was open-ended, and then we had a quantitative, and they 60% plus, I think, on the survey, and it's all online at our websites. They told us the reason they weren't going to prepare is it wasn't going to happen to them, right? I think that's the optimism bias. We have all these biases that we have to factor in when we communicate, the natural tendency for people to feel very confident that they're going to be fine, which is good. We want to have a positive attitude. But one of the things I tell people is, listen, do you wear your seatbelt every day? Because you're not expecting to be in a crash every day, but you're going to go ahead and wear that seatbelt. Why? Because you're risk averse and you're taking every step you can to protect yourself and your family. It's the same with hurricanes. One of the things we've emphasized successfully is, even if you aren't directly affected by the storm, you might have a power outage, or your community might. And there's just always another thing you can do, kind of as your arsenal of protecting yourself, being more comfortable and not having disruption in your life. So yeah, there are people that have a very strong optimism bias. And sadly, after Hurricane Katrina, Florida supported Mississippi and Texas supported Louisiana. So we were on the Mississippi team, and we talked to people, and they said again and again, right along the waterfront there, they said, we thought Camille was the worst thing that could ever happen here. So I think that's another bias, is it's already happened, it won't happen again, or it won't happen to me. And we have to think about that and give people other reasons and other motivations to get ready. In some cases, it's, again, goes back to that, what we learned at Disney. Put people in charge, overcome the thinking that it's just luck. It's not just luck, right? When those homes survive and people survive, they either evacuated because they needed to, or they did something to protect their home. And it's also with when you start talking about kids, sometimes in our work we learn people will say, well, I wasn't going to do anything, but I didn't want my kids to be scared. Okay, we'll take it. Anything that gets them to get ready, right?
Put your seatbelt on. Because it's coming one way or another. We're just about out of time. Let's probably time for one more question. We'll go to Bill after that. How else do you have?
Yeah, Leslie, you touched a lot on just building codes. I'd imagine you've seen a lot of this communities where there aren't the building codes, where you maybe see like much more widespread failure. Is that, I mean, in places where there aren't building codes, do you see response as well with people saying, I don't care what everyone else is doing around me, I want to build better?
So it's a great question again. The trick is to get that aha into the policy leaders' minds before the storm, but very often the post-storm experience, people say, okay, code or no code, I'm going to do it differently. We have an iconic picture taken by a FEMA engineer on the ground after Harvey over in Rockport. And it's an array. And when I saw the picture, I said, this is the picture, folks. So it's on the cover of some of the publications that are in our new playbook. And it's an array of homes. I think there are 5 of them. And it has the year of the building code in front of each home. And you see the progressive improvement in how the home held together based on the year of the code. And those types of visuals are so compelling. But a lot of times, one of the things, the insurance industry has their Fortified program, and Bill has his new Fortified roof. You can do that everywhere. It doesn't matter what the code is. Some of the measures in the Fortified standard are consistent with code, like in places like Florida and South Florida. In other places where we do recovery builds for uninsured and underinsured affected people, there's Central Alabama. We just built 4 tornado homes. There's no code, 0. So the difference between the Fortified standard and the code is pretty big. But they will survive better in their home will next time there's a tornado there. So,
Bill, last question.
Yeah, the whole societal thing is been my bag for a long while, and the 60% in a place say it's never going to happen to them. That's my slide I use is a picture of the continent of Africa, and I say denial is not just not just a river in Africa. My trick to try to get people to at least think about it is make it simple. I say I can make a basic plan for me and my family on 3 pages of paper, double spaced. Why don't you go ahead and do that? You'll probably never need it, but going through the exercise of doing that, you'll be better prepared than if you just ignore it.
Yeah, and it's a peace of mind thing. You've done everything you can do. You can feel good about that. One of the greatest things about Hurricane Strong, as you know, is for the first 4 things out of 5, we give you the steps you need to take. But the 5th is called service. Once you're ready, and if you're able to be ready, then you can help your neighbor. You've got your shutters done, you've got your kit, you've got, everything's all set. You can pivot and help that elderly neighbor figure out how to call back to the kids that are out of state or something like that. And that's how our communities come together, and so often do before the storm. So if you're ready, you can help others who can't help themselves. And then we can leave those resources in the system of emergency management to help those that really need the help, right? And that's one of the ways we can amplify resilience through community and through service.
Let's say great stuff. What final thought do you want to leave us with today? Where do you want to have us go home thinking about?
Well, I want you guys to come and visit flash.org and help us spread the word. And of course, we want to talk about garage doors, but let's partner. Our information, we're nonprofit, we're open source. We want you to take our information and use it and spread it and share it. And any way that we can join forces with anybody that has listened to us today, we're looking forward to doing that.
Terrific. Thank you, Leslie. Great program today. As always fun to have you on. And thanks to Sarah for being there behind the scenes as well. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Hal, great job. Alex, good job back in the control room. We appreciate all of that. It's been another great program today. I want to thank our sponsors once again who make it possible. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau. Why do I have trouble saying that today? Convention and Visitors Bureau. The Weather Company, Weather Boy, and Weather Call, all part of what we do each and every day. Next week, On the hot seat, Dr. Phil Klotzbach going to talk about the hurricane seasonal forecast and where we are, where we haven't been, and where we're headed over the next few months of the season. So we hope you'll join us for that same time next week here on NTWC Live. That's it. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you next week.